All right, folks, now we're back. Now, this is part 3b of the Coach Mad Hatter's Coffee and Comfy Sofa conversation series. This, we will exclusively be talking about the never ending story. The series started out talking about the Wiz and Dorothy's tumbling into this different realm so that she could deal with some very much needed leveling up with regards to her characteristics and the way she loved and the way she viewed things and how she gained her more intimate intrapersonal insight and stamina. And so in part 3A, we mainly took time to deal with my note to self, which I have said in previous recordings that I share those, especially if I'm being urged to share them. But I share them with hopes that they do a little something for you in the realm of living example. And hopefully, you know, what it does for me, that in the sharing of it, it may also do for you. Yes. We talked about Joseph Campbell's, the traditional steps of the hero's journey, as well as the CoachMaddHatter's version called the Shero's Journey, which is now available for pre-order, through pre-order. Let me say that. That comes with the complimentary 2019 Dynamo Edifice, and I'm not sure, for $22, which can be purchased through Cash App, but you must contact us and reserve it, and then we'll send you the information to Cash App. The Dynamo Edifice is an actual activity that will take a moment to complete. So it's not just a worksheet. It is a leveling up of contemplation about self. It can serve very well as the identifying components when journaling and situating one's story to step into the artistic realm of narrative and sharing. And it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to share your story in the public domain, because those that have been interested in it, it's mostly been those that facilitate workshops and those who are into the coaching realm and the creative spaces, the spaces of original content and unique production. It's also been very good for like boutique firms who have small staff and they are really into the intra plus interpersonal relations of their staff. They are the workspaces that care very much about your emotional body, your emotional intelligence, as well as how one show up whole. And so that's what the Dynamo Edifice is all about. It is really, really good for the affinity and the affinity groups and the clubs, because it's a rather in-depth but lightening activity. Like, it allows you to take some of that weight. It allows you to return that gravitational pull so that one can begin to contour, its parabolic orbit, its intrapersonal parabolic orbit. It helps, you know, you know, get it all loosened up so that it can start to do that. Yes? Make you want to dance. One day we shall dance. So, the Never-Ending Story Hood interpretation done by moi. I don't know if I ever said who I was. Just take for granted you know who I am. You know who I am. I'm you. I am you. Hello. I'm just showing up as me. Me, we. So I am not only, how does it go? I'm not only the member, but I'm also the president. I am not also the president, but I am also a very active member of the growing momentum called the CoachMaddHatter's Underland University in Radio, which, if I may say, is the familiar version, the 21st version of that which was founded, known as the Underground Railroad, founded by Harriet Tubman, when she notoriously was the tour guide for folks stepping into their physical freedom. Here at CMHU, we deal with your invisible freedom. We deal with the Underground Railroad from the head to the heart. That's the trail. So we dealing with intrapersonal development so that when you show up whole. And when you find yourself in those opportunities where you have to confidently tell your story, good, bad, or indifferent, you have tools and techniques to coach yourself through that. And that you learn how to listen more to your inner ear versus all that chitter chatter out there. I'm going to become a rapper one day. I'm telling you, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Okay. So, The Never-Ending Story, which is, we're talking about the book, not the film. The book. And the audio book is available on YouTube, 11 hours. Okay? So take your time with it. If you're not into fantastical stories, if you're not into sci-fi, if you're not into like the comic book zones of, if you're not into fairy tales, then it might not do you. It might not do you the just, because you will have to sit and become one with the story. You can just hang out here, and I still never said who I was, did I? I am you. Constantly makes me want to say that. I am Thea, also known as Coach TC, also known as Skyla Indigo Inc., also known as the Golden Wildling. According to other folks, I'm probably something else. We're going to leave it there. We're going to leave it there. It just made me think about like, yeah, whatever. So inside the world of Fantastica, that is the imaginary realm of the main character, which is Bastion. Okay? And so what I'm hoping is that those that come across this particular part of the series and truly like connect already have some type of familiarity with the story, because it is a childhood story. And the film came out in what, 1980? The film came out in I want to say 1986. Film came out in 1986, but it was written by a guy who lived in the midst of the Nazi takeover in Germany. So we're talking about 1930s, 1940s. His name is Michael Ende. Now here's the deal. Michael's dad, which is Edgar Ende, was one of the famous surrealist artists whose work was destroyed and banned during the beginning of the Nazi takeover. And they have an entire documentary on Edgar. So if you wanna get some backdrop to the author's raising and what he had to deal with, which ultimately served as the catalyst for the never-ending story being created, go check it out. Go check it out. So, inside the never-ending story is one of the fabulous, wondrous, I have to say, examples of a story inside of a story. So, Bastien is the real guy, the three-dimensional human, and the story starts off talking about him. So he's the human main character. And then he comes across this incredible book because he was being bullied. And so one day, at the very beginning of the story, at the very beginning of the book, Bastien was like this weird kid who was socially incorrect. And so that attracted a lot of bullies in his life. And so I want to say Bastien no more than 11, 12 at best. So he's still in elementary school, and yeah, they roughing him off real bad, like beating him up, taking his lunch money, dumping him in the trash can and shit like that. So one day it's raining, and he just wasn't in the mood for it. So he ran, and so he ran into this bookstore, dripping wet. The bookstore owner was sitting in the back of the store, and he, in Bastian's, I guess, just wanted to, get the fuck up out of Dodge. He ran through into the back of the store, and he encounters the bookstore owner. And the bookstore owner is sitting in his little, his high, comfy chair, and the book lamp on, and so he's reading this book that catches Bastian's eye, right? And so bookstore owner gives him a hard time for a little while, but then the bookstore's phone rang. Bookstore owner gets up, go answer the phone. Bastien just could not help himself, so he takes the book and he run, right? Because he didn't want to go back home, his dad, before I get too ahead of myself, his mom dies a few years ago, so it's just him and his dad. But his dad is in such space where he's not really a dad. You know what I mean? Like, he's there and he's working. He's on autopilot, making sure the lights and shit is on and they got food to eat, shit like that. But he's not emotionally engaged with Bastien, right? And so that's another thing that contributes to Bastien's weirdness, if you will. So he knew he couldn't go back home. Oh, Bastien's dad worked from home. Okay? So, always there. So, Bastien was like, can't go back home because I'm going to tell my dad why I ain't at school. And then I got to turn around and tell him I stole this book. And so, Bastien was like, well, the next best place, since I'm always there anyway, is to go to school, right? So, we're talking about like one of the old schoolhouses. So, Bastien finds his way up into the school attic, locks himself in there, and he commences to open up the book and read it, right? Inside the book, inside the beginning of the book that Bastien is reading, it tells about this realm called Fantastica. And Fantastica is in turmoil, for the lack of a better term. in turmoil because it is being completely consumed by the nothingness. Now remember, we're talking about an author who is now dealing with the takeover of Nazi energy, right? And so they, within that time span, was getting rid of all of the creative expression. Um, they could not speak freely. They could not create and put it in the marketplace. Um, and let me just say that. Let me just say this. So during that time, just before that time, Germany was considered a cultural hub. And so they were thriving and encouraging folks to be their creative selves and to create original content and to dive into hobbies and situations that would bring forth their artistic natures and things like that. So when the Nazi energy swarmed in, that is the equivalent of the nothingness because it turned drab. There was not a lot of diversity, and so like the color went drab. So the nothingness is the equivalency of the 9 to 5 rat race. If we, want to talk about being Americanized, and how it is that everybody is uniformed, and if it doesn't fit in certain boxes, it's not even considered creativity. But we ebb and flow. Let me say that, especially in the DC, Maryland, Virginia area. We ebb and flow with this thing called unique creativity. And right now, it's booming, in my opinion. Folks are coming into um, the courage to create. So, Fantastica is in jeopardy of the nothingness, and they experience this thing called an emotional void. And they made the equivalency to Wonderland being annihilated. So, like, all the wonder in the world was being threatened. Let's see. So, yes. Okay, so the threat of the nothingness, um, needless to say, put many of the citizens of Fantastica into this state of panic. And so, I want to just, okay, so there is this, so the childlike empress, how about this? I'm just going to speak as if you understand or have or is familiar with the story, because I'm talking back and forth with trying to explain the entire story, give backdrop, and then give commentary to some of the more interesting points that will hone into how we are now as individuals facing the nothingness, or at least we are in jeopardy of facing. Those that get bogged down in the mundane of day-to-day life and have no creativity, no creative outlets. They don't dance, they don't go to sip and paint. Like, they don't do nothing. They get up, they go to work, they come home, they go to sleep, they get up, they go to work, they come home, they go to sleep. Like, that is pretty much their routine, and it's no spice within the routine. The connection with the never ending story is one's invitation to tap into its invisible realms, to cultivate its imagination so that creativity may spring forth however it decides it wants to come out, and that we have the courage to allow it to do so. You see how I'm getting all, yeah, I'm turned in, yeah, I'm now into performance mode. So, so the book, the story within the story, is the indication of Bastian now going on this invisible adventure because he has now found something that has made him come alive on the inside. And to simplify it, all by this so-called mystical story. Story has the power to do that. It is not an ancient pastime for nothing. What has happened with us as a cultural denomination, those that look like me, we have suffered through the generational misrepresentation of someone else having the pen. Like the power of the pen or someone else navigating the nuance of the narrative. And so we've always found ourselves in the last couple of centuries on the wrong side of the fucking story. Other cultural denominations have now found a hideous comfort in being on the outer fringes, telling story like they telling it firsthand. And like I say, I don't speak to ruffle nobody's feathers, but my truth is the truth. Yes? So, Bastian, now in his innocent, weird nature, has found something that he connects with. He connects with the citizens of Fantastica and how they are being threatened with the nothingness. And so he goes on his first adventure. And so his outcast status dissolves as he gradually put himself into the story and how he regards his real life in adjacent with the life of the main character inside of Fantastica, which is called Atreyu. And I'll just drop this. I'll drop this little spoiler to say, because like I said, I don't think we're going to reach all the way to chapter 26, because it's taken me 4 segments just to get to this point. I like to ramble. But closer to the end of the story, in the story, it is revealed the connection between Bastian and Atreyu. They are the same. So Bastian is the figure in the 3D, and Atreyu is the figure in Bastian's imagination. And so the urgency of this threat is what brings them two together. It is what joins them as one, which makes it just, we got to have this journey with self. We have to walk and serve as the warriors and the heroes and the sheroes of our own story. We have to go and save our childlike emperor or empress. We have to serve as our own Atreyus. And I'll say it all the time. Like, if you looking for a professional, if you're looking for a professional coach, you're just not going to find that in me. Professionalism, in my opinion, makes you lose certain things that helps you identify with the Bastian of you. And we really always want to show up in the story as the hero, not realizing connected. Bastian and Atreyu, same person. Like I say, I am you. So I am more Peter Pan. I am more the advocate for the lost boys. And trust me when I say it's already dictated in my natal chart. I came here for that. Like, that's the way I'm built. I'm built that way. So, very rarely, if it's not like a boutique firm, very rarely will I be interested in sitting up in somebody's stuffy corporate office talking to them about their bottom line. You will find me in the art nooks. You will find me in the dance studios. You will find me in the boutique production firms. You will find me on the street. I have more street credit than I have any other credit, other than emotional credit. You know, but one thing that I know for certain, and I've said this many, 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 many times, because I need to be able to show up in my jeans and my tennis shoes and shit. I'm done with the heels. You know, like I said, only for visual effects for here in the virtual world do I even put on makeup. You know, I really want to show up in my yoga pants. Like, I need stuff that stretch. Regardless of how I am on the outside, I really do have 10,000 hours worth of getting folks to connect with their Atreyu, helping them unpack certain things that will become beneficial on their journey to save themselves from the nothingness. And so, it's specifically for those that find their Bastion version tussling with feelings of being overwhelmingly alone, and they suffer with sadness because their version of success does not mimic or meet up with society's version of success. And just a conversation or two will lead them into a better understanding of how their success is just as important, if not way more important, because they came here for a reason, and they did not come here to be society's human resource per se. And so, if they find themselves on the outer perimeters of what's normally known as success, does not mean that they are a deadbeat. It does not mean that they do not fit the mark or fit the bill, or they are somehow less than the perfection that was ordained when they enlisted into the embodiment in a certain time and space. Story will help you find yourself. Story will allow you, your story specifically, will allow you to cultivate those invisible spaces that make you you. We're going to stop neglecting our emotional body. We're going to save Fantastica. Yes? So, in the midst of it, the reason why Fantastica is being consumed by the nothingness, and we're talking Fantastica terms. We're not talking from the realm from Bastian. We're talking about from the realm from Atreyu. Two stories running simultaneously here. So we flipped into Fantastica. We flipped into one's imagination. And I'm telling you, I've had countless conversations with all sorts of people from all sorts of walks of life. The imagination realm is in trouble. Folks are so robotic and so distracted that for them to be able to close their eyes and cultivate that which dwells within is being totally neglected. Totally neglected. They really think that being creative is a well put together outfit. That's another story for another time. as said inside of the Never Ending Story. So, um, what draws Atreyu and Bastian together is the fact that Atreyu is an orphan, right? Because Bastian in the 3D is feeling like a orphan right now because he lost his mom and his dad has emotionally checked out. So, you know, on an intimate level, he feels like an orphan. But the difference, what attracts Bastian to really hone into Atreyu is that Atreyu, even though he did not have a mom and dad, his entire tribe raised him. He was not missing love at all. He knew nothing about being emotionally neglected. No clue. He did not have a mom and dad, but inside his tribe, they really didn't focus on who should be raising who. They all raised him in the little bits and pieces that they could. I'm going to sidebar just for a minute. Hey, I'm Mad Hatter. We about to hit a moment of rambling. You hear me? Okay, so at this moment in my 3D space, when I spoke in part 3a about me having my moment of parental redemption, mainly because of the roles that my social strata says that I should be as a mom, with regards to me being hands-on with raising my 3 godlings, right? Without knowing me personally or without wanting to come sit and get it from the horse's mouth, without wanting to gather in better understanding, some folks will miss the point that because I was on such a underwhelmed, like when I say I was disenchanted with this world and this embodiment, this reality, knowing that the apple doesn't fall too far from the tree, in my mindset, me robbing my children of a solid relationship with their father seemed to not be able, that wasn't good enough for me in my wanting to be the curse breaker. Okay, so we often say we want to give our kids what we didn't have, right? Most of the time we talking about material, superficial, like worldly stuff. Very rarely have I come across folks that say that speak in the realm of the emotional body or the intellectual stability and things of that nature. What I didn't have was dad. What I grew up with was an overwhelming instances of daddy issues. If we were to take in account with that, I knew I would be the problem. I knew that trying to do this whole co-parenting thing, I was always going to want to be in control. And one of the gripes that I used to have with my mom, I don't have with it anymore because the details of my birth chart literally let everybody off the hook. Like seriously, like it gave me understanding to why things happened to me as they did. But before I bumped into that knowledge, I used to always like have a gripe with my mom about her angriness and how that stood in the way, her wanting to be in control of everything, and how she took it upon herself to say when my dad could come over, when I could visit, this, that, and the third. No, you can't see her, and months and months and months, and as long as she had an attitude, things didn't work out. Like I was always in the mix of that, right? And so that took an effect of me growing up, making it her fault. I'm like, okay, so I don't get to see my dad this weekend because you're mad. But the whole month leading up to this weekend, it was you going to your dad's. But for some reason, the phone call that would have put that transaction into motion, he done pissed you off, and so now I can't go. Or he didn't do what you wanted him to do, so now I can't go. So it was one of those things where it's like, I know that because I was raised in my mom's anger, that being a product of that environment, I absorbed quite a bit. I knew that I was a loose cannon with my anger, and that my children's childhood rearing moments that they will never get to redo, would lead them to absorbing certain anger components and certain infusions of me wanting to control the situation. Now, trust me when I say all that I'm saying to you now is in hindsight. All that I'm saying to you now was a what's the word I'm looking for? An accumulation of several um, activities doing the dynamo edifice. Like all of that came forth and afterwards. It was a successive add-on of wisdom and reflection and just like my oldest son say, take your beef. If you know that you wrong, take your beef. So just like being in those moments of solitude where the inner voice was like, okay, you need to pay attention to this. You have anger issues here, so that kind of thing. The adoption of self-coaching and understanding that particular language truly led me into better relations with myself so that I could have those immaculate conversations with self to get a better understanding and be able to reconcile some things. Yes? So, in hindsight, I actually did give my children what I did not have. They have no daddy issues. And it's not like I'm like completely estranged. I am not. I am not. They do not have a childhood that was robbed by anger and insecurities. Now, that's not to say that they don't have the issues, because they're human. But they are different from the norm. They were not particularly raised in the conventional setting of the angry black mama. And I'm no longer afraid to say that back in those days, I was very angry about a multitude of things. And my children would have got wrapped up in that shit. They would have. But because we are conditioned to believe that certain things are to take place and that certain people are to stand in certain positions, even if they are not worthy, just for the sake of it being conventionally correct. And because my ex-husband's family was such the tribe family, my children were raised by the tribe. They understand the tribe, the tribal treasures and trusts and bonds that come along with that. Now, of course, there are some still within that nook that feel that, I am to blame for being absent. And I'm going to have my moment. I am. Even, if it's not right at this moment, to say that I actually did everybody a favor. I really did. Because if I was on set with all my angriness, I know my children will be a different kind of people. I know that they would not bring in the sunshine like they do. And I tell all three of them, when you walk through the door, you bring the sunshine in with you. They free with their laughter. Absolutely they are. They giggle. And I mean, they like genuinely funny. Like that didn't get stomped out by my anger. So, my children were raised by the tribe. And so they, without question, will be able to identify with the hero within them, also known as their Atreyu. They are courageous without needing a whole bunch of effort put forth for them to do things that, especially my oldest one, I tell him all the time, like fearless. I know he probably have his intimate, things that he's afraid of, but just overall, I marvel in that. Like, just seeing him do the things that he do teaches me something that would not have been readily available if I would have raised him. My anger would have stomped all of that out. So, let me reel it back in because we already at 41:14. Goodness gracious. Okay, so, oh, yeah, so I actually talked her through to, oh, well, hold on there. Okay, so, it taps into, the story goes into, when it talks about, Atreyu and his courage and how even though when the message came that he now had to go on an adventure to help save the childlike empress, he did not have an agenda. He did not know which direction he was going in. His mission was not readily clear. He was not sure how he was going to survive. The only thing that he had when he went on this journey, and let me say this, inside the story, when the urgency came to Atreyu, he ain't do this, well, what should I be doing, and who's going with me, and what kind of weapons am I taking with me? He ain't do none of that. He was like, I'm on it. Childlike Empress need me, I'm on it. So the only thing that was given to him on his journey was his amulet. And the amulet did not keep him from harm, but it kept him from dwelling in the heavy emotional residue as a result. He still had to go into and face danger. He still had to deal with certain things that would leave him in dismay, but it didn't stick. He knew that there was spiritual guidance and that there were spiritual connections that would keep him from being sucked in and weighed down by despair. And so he has to deal with the crossing of this thing called the swamp of sadness. Inside of that moment, he loses his only best friend, which was his talking horse. So, with him losing his horse, he still felt it all in that moment, but his amulet did not allow that sorrow to sink into his spirit and weigh him down. He still knew he was on a mission. He still knew that even though the horse was not there with him in spirit, with him in flesh, that he would still be journeying with him in spirit. And so those are the thoughts that rushed forth and allow him to contemplate on so that he could regenerate his courage and get things moving. Yes? And so, yes, and so they made it very clear that even though Atreyu was dealing with um, the situation that could, well, no, it wasn't even could, it gave the significance of being presented as a seemingly hopeless situation. But even so, because of his amulet, he still actively investigated moment to moment. Like, he didn't dismiss that it was a shitty ass situation, but he did not lose hope. Yes. And he intentionally questioned and investigated until he could connect dots that led him to the next. And so he goes from place to place, still on his mission. Mind you, he is on a mission to rescue the childlike empress. And so, after losing his best friend, he investigates and investigates. He's asking questions to himself. And so, as he's asking questions to himself, which is AKA contemplation, certain ideas and certain intimate instructions are leading him to go in this direction or go in this direction. Ask this question to this person. Seek out this person from what you heard from this person. And so eventually it leads him to the aged one, which her name is Morla. And so she's just big, gigantic carving outside of a mountain, but she speaks, right? And so it made me think about when folks are drawn to doing like these mountainous hikes, those that will climb Kilimanjaro or something like that. And when they reach the summit, like they truly will have engaged in this intimate conversation, what could be mistaken as a conversation with self, but I think it's with self plus one's ancestors and invisible muses. Like inside that journey, one will tap into a superhuman conversation that only takes place within and the mountain climb actually turns into a symbolic gesture that reveals answers, as if you were Atreyu standing before Morla, receiving answers. It doesn't mean that all the answers is going to be to your liking, because truly, Morla told Atreyu, we all gonna die. Ain't nobody gonna be able to save the childlike empress. You are silly, you are young and immature, and you need to go home. But I think about like what would happen if that was my oldest son having that conversation with Morla. I think it would be Atreyu like, hey, listen, I'm on a mission to save Morla, so I'm gonna save Morla. I'm gonna save the child like Empress. Morla, I understand what you're talking about, lady, and thank you for your time. It was nice meeting you, but I got shit to do. I can see my oldest doing that. Like, no disrespect for real. Like, Morla, it was wonderful meeting you, my lady. But so Atreyu, he thanks Morla for her time, and he goes and he says, is it in quotes? No, I didn't quote it. But I am going to read this piece. To save to save one's childlike empress and all of Fantastica from the nothingness is a quest to face one's fears and falsehoods, with no apparent weapons other than the determination, courage, and command of action. And that's all the Atreyu had. Other than his amulet, Atreyu had no weapons, and he had just lost his best friend. But he knew that the childlike empress was in need of saving. So he kept moving. He kept it moving. Then he meets up with like this big old spider, right? And so Atreyu gets caught in her web, right? But even in yet again finding himself in a seamless, shitty situation, the spider tells him, for me to bite you and become injected with the venom, within 60 minutes, you may wish yourself somewhere else and you literally will transport. Atreyu, having the wits that he had, his courage commanded him, let her bite you. Let her bite you. So I wrote, because of this, he allows himself to be stung, which instantly enacts genuine bravery that ultimately frees him. Now I'm going to tell you how this works. I'm going to tell you how the CoachMaddHatter's platform works so nicely when we stand in our truth to tell our story, when we take back the power of pen, when we begin to weave into the fabrics of our story versus it just being told by the outer fringes, by those on the outer fringes, when one tells their own story. So because Atreyu had this particular conversation with the big spider, the luck dragon, Falkir, was also caught in the web. By Falkir just being in the moment of that particular conversation, got wind of the knowledge, right? So then, after he saw Atreyu wish himself, Falkir also allowed himself to get stung, and he wished himself about that joint. You see? So, we have to begin to share those moments that are shitty. We have to begin to understand that sometimes life is going to sting our fucking asses. But within that moment, and I know I'm telling myself this because I swear I'm telling you, it feels like I'm about to come up on, about to come up on a moment that is going to feel like I'm about to be bit by this big ass spider. Lord have mercy. Okay. And by me standing in my truth and being able to have my amulet that will release the shame and the guilt and the unnecessary judgment so that I can, within the moments, and I really think it was a representation of the sting of life, when things happen that ache us so bad that within that moment of misery, what I like to call golden chaos, within that moment, like, we can choose to either suffer and pile on with all the guilt and the agony and the shame, or we can wish our asses somewhere else, and that the potency of that wish gets traveled into the cosmos. It goes into the ethos. It hits the ether. And that those that are celestially connected to us, they go into action to make that dream come true. And even though we can't like instantly teleport our asses somewhere, we're in the 3D, but it still puts in a ticker. It still pulls the number for the situation to unfold in a more better light. Yes. So not only was he able to free himself up out of there, Falkir, the luck dragon, figuring that Atreyu's bravery served as an example that ultimately freed him. He was Atreyu's like luck dragon for life. Like he never left Atreyu's side. Well, other than a few other instances, but he was devoted to Atreyu for the rest of he became Atreyu's luck dragon. And you know how I love to metaphorically speak. And I know that there are several that don't believe in luck and all that other kind of stuff. And so I want to read a little piece that that Robert Berg wrote on his blog in relation to certain things. In relation to what I was just talking about the shitty ass circumstances that be stinging us, and so that we make sure we have the symbology of the amulet so that shit don't pile on and the residue don't get all stuck, and so that we be able to get that shit up off of us so that we can again regenerate the courage to and that by folks that are just intertwined in the moment of the conversation, whether we are having a conversation with someone else, telling them about the instances, or conversations with self, and within you sharing, your reflection, or you standing in your truth of your story, that part of the story actually is powerful enough for someone else to gain their bravery, and and they be able to take your example and deal with the stings of their situations, and bloop, and next thing you have like a friend for life, because if it wasn't for you and your conversation and you getting stung and them being able to see how you maneuvered out of that, they'd still been stuck in the web getting ready to be dinner for old girl. So which is truly what this is what okay, we're in quotes now, which is truly a powerful instance when one faces its shadows, sorrows, and dark peaks and valleys. The explicit urge to give up on life, especially when one is unaware or unintelligent regarding its access to courage, strength, gumption, grit, and grace. And I put in, because we be plagued with worry, can easily consist of a traffic jam of hopeless questions depicting a classic case of clinical depression. So in part 3a, I spoke about what was going on with me at the brink of 2009 when my call came in, and how I was just riddled with depression because I had yet to tap into the source that would generate the courage that could lead me into a better realm of questions that would thus produce a better realm of answers that could, wish my ass somewhere else. And let me just say this. That is not to speak of wishes in a superficial or a fantastical way. Us speaking, or us being able to command our courage, and I'm really hoping that I'm saying this, that when my moment comes and it comes sting my ass, that I don't forget all this. But that we have within those moments. Because, see, I really think that the significance of her telling him that you have within 60 minutes to wish yourself somewhere else, I think beyond the 60 minutes is when the shame and the guilt and all of that shit piles on. Like, you have a very finite portal by which you can begin to command some shit that will instantly take root. It might not instantly manifest, but it will instantly take root. And because of the command and the power of your words, the sharpening, step number 9, the reward, the seizing of the moment, and the sharpening. Okay? I think when we get in habit of exercising that power, within that particular moment. And I'm just going to go with the 60 minutes. Did I say 60 seconds earlier? I'm sorry. It's a whole 60 minutes. Now, we had 60 seconds and we would have to, but according to the story, and because I love the story so much, we're going to stick with that parameter. Within the 60 minutes, there's so much that can go, but come on, a whole hour now, 60 minutes. And you know how much I've been rambling. Quite a bit can go down in 60 minutes, right? Yes? So within the first 60 minutes of that shit stinging us, and we just like, because we really do be wasting that 60 minutes. We be wasting that precious time. Oh my God, why is this happening to me? And yeah, we do all of that. Just imagine if we contoured those notions, rearranged a few sentiments, took the active choice to say, all right, I'm feeling shitty about this, but this can happen, this gonna happen, this gonna happen, and this gonna happen. In the midst of me feeling shitty. Like, don't try to wish the shitty away. Let that, because the venom had to wear off and let it do what it do. Because in the midst of you being in company of the venom, I think that's the magical catalyst. That's the catapulting. So, with that said, I'm telling you, we're about to roll it down. So now we about to step into part 3C. Because I just don't want to make them any more longer than an hour. So, but we almost through with it. We're almost there. Um, and so yeah, it's the afternoon and I'm hungry now. So I am going to take an official break. I'm going to put some on my belly, and I invite you to do the same if you've been rocking with me for the last 2 hours. At least, go freshen up the throat chakra. I know I have to because I've been talking nonstop. So I'm going to rest the vocal cords for a moment, and I'll regroup, and yeah.